Nanru Pirandaravara, it just means the world is one. All the people are my kinsmen.
The Indo-Pacific is the most culturally and economically dynamic region in the world.
Platform we created today, the dialogue we have today, we will continue. And perhaps later this year or next year, we will have the second round.
Tamil Nadu is here to partner with you for the collective good, for preserving this very crucial last frontier, the Indo-Pacific region.
It's a very, very well organized conference.
Good morning, everyone. And Mallika, thank you very much for your very, very kind words addressed to me. And also for being so persuasive to manage to make me agree to come for this flying visit. Air Marshal Matheswaran, Ambassador Gair, Additional Chief Secretary Verma, distinguished guests present today. It is a signal honor for me and a privilege to be here to be addressing you today and sharing some of my thoughts. I agreed because of the subject with which I have been deeply involved and continue to be so. And I will try and share the Bangladeshi perspective of the importance, the opportunities, and the potentials for regional cooperation. That is where my heart lies, for a sustainable blue economy. And of course, it is in the context of climate change, ecological threats, technological, economic cooperation, rule of law, all these things, how they interact with each other. Now, I'll be dwelling on basically 5 points. One, the oceans. This is an oceanic world. Our planet Earth is a misnomer. It should have been called Oceania, because the 71% of the surface that dominate what happens to us, what it does to us, and what we do to them. I will deal with the blue economy potentials as we see it from the Bangladeshi side, but more importantly, the dangers that I see to it from an over-exploitation, forgetting that we could easily kill the goose that lays the golden egg. We should not end up, this is our last frontier, and we must not end up doing to our blue frontiers, the last frontier, what we have already done so rapaciously to the green and brown frontiers. The oceans are all interlinked. None of them are in splendid isolation. Man does not live in isolation. And what happens in one part of the ocean affects everybody else. You may think in the other side of the world that happens there, but that's not the case. as more and more scientific knowledge becomes aware, each ocean somehow affects the integrity of the other ocean. Each water body affects it. And I recall the words Air Marshal Matheswaran said. His quotation from Dickens's Tale of Two Cities, the best of times and the worst of times. In a sense, we are at the best of times. Technologically, we have reached a level of advancement which we would not have dreamt of a couple of centuries ago. But we have also brought ourselves to the brink of a precipice, which we would not have thought a couple of centuries ago. So in that sense, we juxtapose these two within us. And how we will end up will depend on what we do to ourselves. The Indo-Pacific, for me, is like a universe. I prefer to focus more on my own galaxy. And that is, for me, the Bay of Bengal. There's so many, the population, 8 billion, interacting in different ways. Can we, in my sense, do something in the Bay of Bengal which will act as a module for the others? Can we then apply it to other water bodies in the Indian Ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, and other oceans? The Indian Ocean is also known as the Great Middle Bay. Geographically, it's the third largest ocean, but it's right in the center of the oceanic world. And from there, it is an ocean of vast diversity, 2.7 billion, very tightly packed, densely packed. By 2030, population will increase by another 27%. And so, the consumptive nature of man, I think at the heart of everything is our consumptive nature, our habits are driving us to the brink of that precipice I mentioned earlier. How can we, when we are talking of sustainable growth, you harvest, but you also allow the soil to replenish itself, to re-nurture itself, to re-nurture you. And I think we may have overtaken the capacity of Mother Earth to renew and heal herself faster than we, dig deeper into her. The Bay of Bengal, in turn, if the Indian Ocean is the great central bay or middle bay, the Bay of Bengal is the lesser central bay in the Indian Ocean. And so if you're talking of the Indo-Pacific, we are basically right at the epicenter of the Indo-Pacific. And I think if you imagine yourselves, those of us who inhabit the Bay of Bengal, then we need to take a deeper and closer and more reflective view of how we view these water bodies. Air Marshal, you mentioned about Westphalia. The Commons don't care a twit for Westphalia. They don't go by the rules and regulations of Westphalia. They have their own laws. There is an equilibrium in the Commons. And unless that is respected, we are going to end up destroying it. I'm going to fast skim the blue economy concept. There is the World Bank concept, the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihood and jobs, and ocean ecosystem health. Mostly, when people talk about the blue economy, I literally see dollar signs leaping out of their eyes. It makes me very afraid. And that's the point I mentioned, that just harvesting and skimming and taking and extracting, but it's an endangered zone. And I will mention some of the challenges, apart from the traditional challenges. There are 3 challenges which face us in the Bay of Bengal, and we need to tackle that before we can address the challenges, the larger challenges in the larger oceanic world. There is a growing dead zone in the Bay of Bengal, 60,000 square kilometers or so, discovered rather recently. The mangrove forests are depleting. The Sundarbans, of which we are very proud, have already decreased 50% in the last 150 years. And I have said that if we don't tend to them, we'll probably lose the rest of it in less than 75 years. And you mentioned plastic wastes. Sundarbans affects us in the northern side of the Bay of Bengal. The plastic waste affects you immediately in the southern side of the Bay of Bengal. And when they degrade to nanoplastics, plastics never degrade. They may take 100 years, 1,000 years, they will never degrade. They will just get ingested by the fish, get absorbed in the tissues of the fish, and we will end up, probably our grandchildren will end up eating plastic fish. And I think we need to, that's what we need to look at, sustainability. These are dangers that no one country, whether we are here in the Bay of Bengal or elsewhere, we can tackle it. This is replicated everywhere. Mangroves are disappearing everywhere. Some people are trying to regrow it, but the urge for getting cash crops to replace mangoes, that is the reason why mangroves disappeared. Mangroves sequester, is the largest sequester of carbon dioxide. It also oxygenates the air more than the normal trees do, but it's not commercially viable. The Indonesians are now discovering that no, they can extract natural dyes, which can be used by the textile industry and other industries, from the leaves, the barks, as well as the fruit. It's called the mangrove apple. And maybe we need to start thinking about that yes, there is money also in the mangroves, but we need to tend and protect it. Because global greenhouse warming can only be addressed by everyone working towards it, and we need to restore our mangroves in the Bay of Bengal. Coral reefs will disappear with greater ocean warming, and if coral reefs disappear, they have they service maybe, they occupy only 0.1% of the ocean floor, but they support 25% of all marine life. There's a whole chain of species dependent on the corals. And if the corals disappear, that keystone species will disappear, and then a whole chain of species of marine life will disappear. And that is what people don't really understand. So, as I said, let me come to the last part of my, there is one point I wish to make here before I go to the last part, there is, non-traditional security. A lot of you are people who have been in areas which deal with traditional security, but non-traditional security can easily translate into traditional security threats. When human populations growing at the rate that we are, and it's a consumptive species on planet Earth, if they eat into the resources and the resource is not able to then manage to replenish itself, it can lead to conflicts. The conflicts will be local, but they will never remain local. They will spread in different ways, in different forms. And when that happens, at any point, it can tip into a traditional conflict. Can that happen in the Bay of Bengal? It is the most densely populated region in the world. If we are not careful, it could very well happen. And therefore, we need to address these challenges which threaten our normal security. The only way we can do it is to adopt a regional cooperative approach. It cannot be these problems, which I've mentioned, and there are many more than that, cannot be tackled by one country alone. And If we imagine, and we don't have that sense of imagination yet, the Bay countries do not have a sense of being together yet. They are a quarter of the world population in the Bay of Bengal. The aggregate GDP is fourth after the US, China, and the European Union. It's the fastest growing region in the world today, despite all the problems. If we can get our acts together, learn how to cooperate, conserve the Bay, then perhaps that's the way for the future for us. Thank you.